Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. Welcome to the launch of Integrated Ocean Management, the latest blue paper commissioned by the High-Level Panel for a Sustainable Ocean Economy. My name is Craig Hansen, and I am the Vice President of Forests, Food, Water, and the Ocean at the World Resources Institute. And I have the pleasure of moderating this event today. Today, we'll be briefed on this blue paper by some of its authors. Then we will have a discussion on integrated ocean management with a distinguished panel of experts and government representatives. After that, we will answer questions from you. Featured speakers today include Minister Ricardo Santos, Minister of the Sea for Portugal, and Sherpa for the Portuguese Prime Minister on the High-Level Panel for a Sustainable Ocean Economy. We also have Vidar Helgesen, Norway's Special Representative for the Ocean, and Sherpa for the Norwegian Prime Minister on the High-Level Panel for a Sustainable Ocean Economy. Also joining us are Jan Gunnar Winter, Director of the Center for the Ocean and the Arctic, and the Specialist Director at the Norwegian Polar Institute. Jan Gunnar is a lead author of today's blue paper. We also have Minh-Han Dai, Chair Professor of Marine Biogeochemistry at the Xiamen University and academician at the Chinese Academy of Science. Minh-Han is also a lead author of today's blue paper. We also have Marie Wiñao Meñez, professor at the Marine Science Institute of the University of the Philippines. Marie is a co-author. And finally, we're joined by Amy Trice, Director of Ocean Planning at the Ocean Conservancy. And Amy as well is a co-author. So you're going to hear from a lot of the people that actually prepared today's blue paper. Now, a few housekeeping items before we get going. When posing a question, please type them in the question and answer box that's located at the bottom of your screen. And also, if you could, please indicate which panelist you would like to have respond. And be sure you write a question. Now, for those of you who may not be familiar with it, the High-Level Panel for a Sustainable Ocean Economy is a unique initiative of 14 world leaders committed to advancing solutions for ocean health and ocean wealth that support the Sustainable Development Goals and build a better future for people and the planet. Combined, these 14 countries represent 20% of the world's shipping fleet, 20% of the world's fisheries, 30% of the world's exclusive economic zones, and 30% of the world's coastlines. Co-chairs of the panel are the Prime Minister of Norway and the President of Palau. The Ocean Panel is committed to catalyzing bold, pragmatic ocean solutions in governance, technology, and finance. It's committed to creating a new relationship between humanity and the ocean, allowing us to produce, protect, and prosper. And finally, the Ocean Panel is committed to supporting the Sustainable Development Goals for a better future. To gather input into its work, the Ocean Panel has commissioned a series of 16 blue papers. Each paper provides the latest science and cutting-edge thinking on how science, technology, policy, governance, and finance can be applied to catalyze a more sustainable and prosperous relationship with the ocean. So far, we've launched 6 of them, and we'll be launching the remaining 9 over the coming 5 months, culminating in October of this year. Now, you can actually receive information about these blue papers by emailing us at info@oceanpanel.org, and we have the links at the end of today's presentation. Now, today is the global launch of the blue paper on integrated ocean management. Integrated ocean management enables a shift from business as usual to business as sustainable. Today, too often, ocean management is fragmented, focused on individual sectors, and unresponsive to the social and ecological priorities. Integrated ocean management helps transition from this to a more holistic, multi-sectoral, and adaptive approach that brings together social, economic, and ecological dimensions of development. Integrated ocean management puts ecosystems and knowledge at the center of every decision-making process. And by balancing various human needs and ocean uses, integrated ocean management safeguards ocean health while supporting ocean wealth. I now give the floor to our distinguished guest, Minister Ricardo Santos. He is the Portuguese Minister of the Sea as well as the Sherpa to the Portuguese Prime Minister, who is a member of the Ocean Panel. Minister Santos will be honoring us with some opening remarks and will also be joining the panel discussion later on. Minister, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Greg. And let me start by greeting my colleagues of the panel, each of one in its own country, and by congratulating the organizers on this initiative, and welcome, of course, everyone that decided to join us today. Integrated Ocean Management, as you said, Greg, is the 14th of the Blue Paper series launched by the high-level panel. It addresses one of the most important ocean-related issues, the management of human activities in the marine component of our planet. And the paper gives a global approach of the real difficulties of managing human affairs and points out directions. This paper, I'm pleased that you have here today Jan Gunnar Winter and Minyan Dai, who are the lead authors, involve also numerous authors, and this launch could not be timelier. In the past few months, at different paces throughout different regions, we have faced an unprecedented situation, COVID-19. Not the first pandemic to affect the world, but clearly the first in a world so interlinked and globalized as the one we live in. And the impacts go well beyond the spread of the virus SARS-CoV-2. Entire societies were immobilized and economies, as we know them, were deeply wounded in just a few months. The effects of COVID-19 are now the object of extensive analysis that will be continued in the future. It is rather important to have a good understanding of the effects of this pandemic, COVID-19, in short and long term, on the so-called ocean economy, as it is important to understand how it affected ocean ecosystems. As far as I know, the high-level panel will intend to give a view and a visit to this in terms of analysis of the problem. At the moment, COVID-19 and its economic and social effects, as well as environmental consequences, are on the top of the agenda. And that's one of the reasons why you are also discussing this by web. In that sense, it is important to understand that the ocean can contribute and be part of the solution on health issues. Now remember that one of the crucial components of the test that is being used to diagnose the new coronavirus, and that has also played its role in diagnosing other pandemics like AIDS and SARS, involves an enzyme isolated from a single-celled primitive organism, an archaea, found in deep marine hydrothermal vents. And the risks of irreversible loss of marine biodiversity at local or large scale, with the consequent eradication of genetic material that may be essential to future pharmaceutical products, must be of central concern on ocean management. Although only between 15 and 20% of the known species on the whole planet are to be found in the oceans, the truth is that the oceans contain more orders and phyla than the land ecosystems. Of the 35 animal phyla, 32 are represented in the ocean, and from these, 13 are exclusively oceanic. These numbers, more than the number of species, show the importance of the oceans as a repository of genetic and molecular diversity of the planet. Understanding the potential of the ocean in providing biogenetic resources of still unknown nature that can provide relevant service on the health and wealth of humans is of major value. And the work undertaken by high-level ocean panel has an important role in understanding the roots for a sustainable use of the oceans and to value its socio-economic potential and reality. The ocean panel includes the political leaders of 14 countries, as is shown here, and represent countries that are distributed throughout the whole oceans of the planet. The ocean panel has been described as a fast track to science policy interaction, determined to create a new relation between society and the ocean, building on a sustainable ocean economy rooted in science. It is in line with other initiatives such as the United Nations Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainable Development and its goal of delivering science for the future we want. As we all know, 2020 was planned to be the super year for the ocean. This has been postponed, but the goal has not disappeared. The United Nations Ocean Conference that would have been take place in Lisbon in less than a month will now take place probably in 2021. And the ambitious plan it set out remains exactly the same, turning into action the Sustainable Development 14, launching a new way to engage with the ocean, more inclusive, more connected, and bringing on board citizens, including youth, institutions, and companies. With a new sense of urgency brought by the present situation, we are staring down the barrel of the gun, and the new way to engage with the ocean is critical. And the ocean panel is a strong stepping stone to turn this into reality. The panel, in addition to political recommendations in conducting thematic papers and reports developed by experts and scientists, including the blue paper we are launching today. Ocean management is critical in ocean affairs. The blue paper highlights the multiplicity of agencies and institutions with jurisdictions, competence, or authority on the ocean, creating a challenge at the coordination and cooperation level. I won't go into too much detail over the content paper, since a presentation of its findings will be conducted by the lead authors. The paper focuses on the framework of integrated ocean management and the importance of correct implementation. It addresses also some key examples. To this end, I would like to mention the Portuguese example. Integrated ocean management is one transversal line of the Portuguese National Ocean Strategy. This strategy is now being reviewed for the next decade and will be aligned with international and European strategies, as for instance, the Agenda to 2030 of the United Nations and the Green Deal of the European Union. Portugal has made significant efforts concerning good practice in governance and management of the marine environment, being an active player in regional marine protection organizations, such as OSPAR, in the regional fisheries management organizations, as well as a country attentive to the need to promote and maintain the good state of the marine environment so that we have a healthy ocean able to provide us the service that we depend on such food, oxygen, health, biodiversity, among others. Committed with new policies like marine spatial planning, the Marine Strategy Framework Directive, the new Common Fisheries Policy, the Integrated Coastal Management are some examples on how we look at the management of human activities. Portugal is also revising its network of marine protected areas in view to reach 40% in 2020 and disengage on the agenda of 30% in 2030. This is another relevant instrument of ocean management and remains committed to deepen integrated marine processes. Just to finish, let me remind that plants and animals proliferate in the oceans long before life appeared on land, and long before we humans became the dominant, but still vulnerable species, as COVID-19 is proving now. The oceans contain a lot more genetic information about the evolution of life on Earth than does the land. We have to care about this great realm where, more than in other place, the need to address the human impacts must be led by shared concerns. Integrated ocean governance is cornerstone for the aim of its sustainable use. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Minister. Fantastic to hear your perspectives. It's fantastic to see you and your country's dedication to this issue. And thank you to your Prime Minister for being a member of the high-level panel. And thank you to you for your leadership.
Thank you.
Now, let's actually hear about the findings of the paper on integrated ocean management. And to that, I will turn to the two lead authors. First up will be Jan Gunnar Winter. Jan Gunnar, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Craig, and hello to everybody, and thank you for joining this webinar and the launch of the Blue Paper. Here are the authors of the paper. They represent the breadth and the depth of expertise from various areas of the world. And first of all, I would like to thank them for their hard work and excellent cooperation that also have resulted in a shorter version of the Blue Paper being accepted for publication in Nature. Now, what is integrated ocean management? Well, our Blue Paper makes the case for integrated ocean management, which combines value creation and the safeguarding of the ecosystem health. By drawing on previous successes and failures, the paper identifies existing obstacles in policy and practice and lays out a set of guiding principles towards successful integrated ocean management. I will introduce the concept of integrated ocean management, briefly present our case studies, and give an overview of our key findings. We have also identified 6 opportunities for action that we will get back to later on. With exceptional growth in economic activities relating to the ocean economy, the need for a sustainable concept where socio-economic development can occur without environmental degradation is widely recognized. This is manifested at the global level by the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea, UNCLOS, which provides the basic global framework for ocean governance. Since UNCLOS was signed in 1982, the ocean economy has continued to grow alongside our need for food, energy, transportation, and recreation from the ocean. Existing ocean industries expand while new ones appear. At the same time, new challenges are emerging as a result of climate change, loss of biodiversity, pollution, and extractive activities. Our ocean is now facing these pressures at unparalleled rates and magnitudes. The mismatch between the drive for short-term economic gain versus long-term prosperity and a healthy, resilient ocean is increasingly apparent. As a result, we see a pressing need for holistic, knowledge-based and ecosystem-based approaches to ocean management, just as the minister said. Integrated ocean management is such an approach. The goal of integrated ocean management, hereby called IOM, is to preserve the long-term health and resilience of marine ecosystems while improving livelihoods and creating jobs, and thereby supporting a sustainable ocean economy. Shortly, creating a win-win situation. It does this by managing ocean resources in an integrated way. As you can see from the figure, stakeholder engagement is key, but the ecosystem is always at the center of IOM. We had our starting point of the analysis of IOM in practice in different parts of the world, including the coastal city Xiamen in China, Norway, the Seychelles, the United States, and the Coral Triangle, the latter consisting of Indonesia, Malaysia, Papua New Guinea, the Philippines, Solomon Islands, and Timor-Leste. The 5 case studies represent different situations with respect to climatic and oceanic conditions, geographical scales, the nature of economic activities, and political contexts and regulatory environments. Nevertheless, there are significant commonalities that provide lessons for other contexts. The common denominator is that increasing uses of and pressures on marine and coastal ecosystems drive the need to consider the totality of pressures on the entire ocean space. I will now summarize the key lessons learned from our case studies. The first lesson learned is that climate change is manifesting itself in each of the area studies, in tropical, temperate, and Arctic and marine environments, posing a major challenge to ocean management. In this respect, IOM is a way of addressing multiple ocean uses while integrating the impacts of climate change into management. The Seychelles is an example of a state that has incorporated climate change adaptation into a marine spatial planning process to support both its ocean economy and environmental goals. Second, information is key. It is critical to have robust data series on the evolution of essential environmental variables as well as on economic activities. Also, such data must be translated into information that is useful for management. And information should be transparent, accessible, scientifically sound, updated, and in appropriate formats. The Coral Triangle Initiative is an example where formal and informal platforms for data sharing and capacity building have been important for facilitating regional and broader scale policy support and frameworks to harmonize various national action plans. The third lesson is that implementation, moving from paper to practice, is essential. Foundation in law is, however, not the requirement for successful IOM. In some cases, legal authority can make it easier to define objectives and goals, as was the case with Massachusetts in the United States. In other places, such as Rhode Island in the United States, reinterpreting existing legal frameworks created the mechanisms for IOM and has been a constructive way forward. A different example is Norway, where sector-based legislation combined with overarching management plans rely on political will rather than on separate legal basis for IOM. Fourth, stakeholder involvement is critical to both ensure that the practical information needed to develop IOM measures is available and build the legitimacy required for effective implementation. For example, in the Coral Triangle, stakeholder engagement has been ensured by letting local community members manage marine protected areas, abbreviated MPAs. This approach has successfully eased the previous perception of MPAs as serving conservation or protectionist interest, not human interest, thus driving a top-down, nature-centric agenda that alienates local communities and ends up marginalizing conservation. In community-based MPAs in Papua New Guinea that protect grouper spawning aggregations, there was a 10-fold increase in the reproductive population compared with an unprotected site after 5 years as a result of the initiative. Fifth, IOM needs to be institutionalized. There has to be a designated process for determining how to consider the various pressures on and uses of ocean space in a comprehensive manner and make decisions on that basis. In Xiamen in China, the municipality initiated an integrated coastal management leadership group consisting of the mayor and officials from different governmental departments, under which an ocean office was established and tasked with organizing regular meetings with ocean-related sectors. A sixth and final lesson is that due regard needs to be given to context. It is critically important to tailor IOM to the characteristics and needs of the region in question. One size does not fit all. The concrete economic activities, community needs, the goals of societies, the environmental pressure should be the point of departure for the development of IOM. The need for tailor-made solutions is a key point to take away from our blue paper. Regardless, we identify 6 opportunities for action that we consider universal. My colleague Minhan Dai will now explore these further. Thank you.
So thank you, Gunnar. With the integrated ocean management, we see tremendous opportunities for action. In the blue paper, we'll highlight 6 of them. A first opportunity for action is harnessing science and knowledge. I hope you all agree with me that the importance of science in integrated ocean management cannot be overemphasized. It is thus vital to strengthen our knowledge about the ocean by developing and disseminating new data, as well as better using existing knowledge, including traditional knowledge. The 2017 Global Ocean Science Report demonstrates clearly that many countries lack fundamental scientific capacity to support their efforts on ocean governance. Tools are needed to develop, strengthen, coordinate the management of human activity in marine ecosystem. These include increasing science and monitoring effort, knowledge sharing, and the transfer of technology and digital infrastructure, tools that are crucial, especially crucial in the least developing countries and small island developing states. We encourage and urge policymakers to further develop international collaboration and cooperation in marine and ocean sciences and related science by building on established structures such as the Intergovernmental Oceanographic Commission and using the upcoming United Nations Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainable Development as a vehicle for this. The second opportunity for action identified by our blue paper is to establish partnership between public and the private sector. Private business are essential for achieving sustainable ocean economy. Currently, investments, infrastructure, and the business are developed within ocean industry that have different definition of and the standard the vision for achieving standardability and governance. In practice, long-term sustainability can only be achieved if best practice are applied across the public and the private sectors and where productive partnerships are established. So integrate ocean management approach that brings together relevant actors from government, business, academia, and the civil society from full spectrum of activity to collaborate for a sustainable future of a shared marine environment. Ocean-related business at all scales should be encouraged to cooperate in developing principles and guidelines for sustainable conduct. For example, the UN Global Compact Action Platform for Sustainable Ocean Business, which has already developed principles and guidelines for sustainability that several of the world's largest ocean businesses have signed on to, and serve as an inspiration. The third opportunity for action is strengthening stakeholder engagement, as pointed out by Gunnar. The 5 case studies demonstrate that active community participation and the inclusion of the traditional and the local knowledge have proven useful, very useful, I have to emphasize, the local level for establishing and operating ocean governance. Planning at the local level, especially in developing countries, requires taking approaches that are tailored to different contents of the governance systems. Developing such strategy and implementing them also requires time, resources, and the political will that sometimes are limited or absent. In all stages of developing and implementing IOM, governments should ensure transparency and active involvement of the local community and other relevant stakeholders. In designing well-managed engagement process, it's vital to consider scientific, cultural, societal, economic, and the political contexts. Number 4 of the opportunity of action is improving capacity building. As I spelled out early on, capacity building enhances scientific and the regulatory efficiency as well as the institutional and collaborative capability, which is crucial to strengthening ocean governance. One obvious step forward is for each nation or region with multiple nations to develop IOM that is appropriate for their situation and the circumstances. It is well documented that scientific capacity is inadequate in many regions and countries, and that lack of institutional capacity is also a challenge. Nations and other identities that have pursued IOM must therefore share their experiences, and the regional cooperation can accelerate capacity building. Successful regional effort at IOM should well inspire similar effort in other regions. The fifth opportunity for action is implementing regulatory framework. Failure to implement existing international instruments is perhaps the most significant weakness of ocean governance systems. The global ocean governance framework is supplemented by many regional instruments, often combined with national legislation. However, implementation of the existing legal framework is often inadequate and ineffective. An important legal gap with say
It seems we've lost Minhan. Jan Gunnar?
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me well?
Yes. Would you maybe like to complete?
Yeah, I think I know what you was going to say. We are well coordinated, and that's great. To end now, I think we spent a lot of time. I would just emphasize the final and sixth opportunity for action, and that is also, I see some of the questions that are posted. It's about how to develop adaptive solutions in integrated ocean management. We emphasize in the paper that the marine ecosystems are by nature dynamic over both space and time. There are strong variations in the physical, chemical, and biological characteristics, with depth as a third dimension, which is unlike the terrestrial systems. And thus ocean governance needs to reflect this. And then, as we heard, one of the most serious challenges facing our ocean today is climate change. And many regions already suffer from the effects of climate change, especially the least developed countries and small island states, where coastal communities and even whole countries are threatened. These challenges are worsened when ocean management systems are not holistic and adaptable. We argue that forward-looking adaptive solutions where risk is explicitly considered will become an even more important element of IOM. Ocean governance must consider expected changes in the marine environment and in human interactions with the ocean by using the best available scientific knowledge on climate change and including adaptive mechanisms as a vital part of IOM. And finally, climate change represents a challenge vastly larger than anything we have faced before. The ocean is intimately connected to climate and vice versa. The perhaps most important issue in the future is therefore our ability to efficiently take action on climate change. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jan Gunnar. And thank you also, Minhan. Wonderful paper. I encourage everyone on this webinar to download it, and I'll show you how later on. But first, we're going to dive into some of these case examples with a panel discussion. And so, step right up to the virtual stage here, panelists. Here we go. We're going to get a chance to kind of get your perspectives on integrated ocean management in the context of your own national experience. So first, I'm going to turn things over to you, Minister Santos. Portugal is one of just a few countries with a dedicated ocean ministry. Now, given your experience as the head of such ministry, do you consider that having a centralized structure within government that's dedicated to the ocean, does that benefit integrated ocean management?
Yes, my obvious question is yes, and I think I can assure that we have the conviction that having a Ministry of Ocean, of the Sea, is important to work on the integrated management strategy in the ocean. And it is important also for other reasons. It also gives a greater relevance to the subject, and it makes more visible the issues of ocean affairs that in some occasions is are not given the importance they have and they should have. At the same time, the ministry, as it is built, deals with transversal issues and works on the idea of sharing and cooperating with other set of other ministries. There are benefits at the management level, and the integration of different ocean issues in one minister allows for a facilitated approach to integrated ocean management. Evidently, it also entails a close cooperation with the other relevant ministries, but the ocean is given the same importance of other subjects of others. It, in my opinion, levels the playing field. At the same time, in terms of the rationale of the European Commission, I would like to remind that we have a commissioner that is dedicated to ocean and fisheries. Given this integrated approach on the ocean and the seas, a good playing level and more integration.
Great, great. Thank you for that. I know you have a busy schedule and you may have to leave early, so I'm going to take the time we have with you to ask you one more question. And that is this: since 2014, Portugal engaged in an incredible effort to develop a marine spatial plan that maps and considers all past, present, and future uses of the ocean at the national level. So how did this effort contribute to better ocean management in your country? And what advice might you give to other nations that are planning to do the same?
Okay, you know that Portugal is an archipelagic country. It faces the Atlantic. We have around 4 million square meters of territory, most of it ocean territory, to manage and to care about. And very early Portugal, of course, faced the great challenge of marine spatial planning and was engaged with the obligation as member of the European Union to do it properly. And we have immediately implemented the European directive dedicated to this topic. So for those who are not of course, Portugal is the only country in this high-level panel who belongs to the European Union. We have obligatory legislations to fulfill these things, and one of them is the Marine Spatial Planning Directive. Currently, Portugal almost finished its national plan, missing only the part dedicated to the Azores that will be ready by September. And sorting and managing use and activities in such a vast territory is not an easy task. I would like to find that we care a lot about the deep ocean and the activities in the deep ocean and seamounts. But it is essential that we manage these activities at this wide scale. It is essential in order to find synergies and avoid conflicts and make the most sustainably of such a vast space. To other nations, and underlying the different realities of countries, I would like to stress the need of marine spatial planning. And the need of have plans that we in the European Union have is the Marine Strategy Framework Directive. They're divided in 11 qualifiers with targets that we should accompany and measure currently in view to measure the effects of our activities in the ocean and make corrections. Only with this process is possible to manage spatial and temporal disruption that may occur of human activities. And in marine areas, we need to achieve ecological, economic, and social goals as defined by the Marine Strategy Framework Directive. These goals are to be defined through a political process that involves discussion and interaction between science, governance, and the society in overall, including not only enterprises, business, but also most important non-governmental organizations working on the field of environment. Another issue that integrates with this is our plan of marine protected areas and our understanding how important they are to fulfill the good goals of the spatial planning and ocean management.
Great. Thank you, Minister, and thank you for you and your country's leadership on this issue. I'm now going to turn now to another great country, Norway. Vidar Helgesen is here to share some perspectives, and as you read the Integrated Ocean Management Blue Paper, Norway is one of the case examples, as you heard Jan Gunnar talk about. So Vidar, Norway has been one of the leading countries to pioneer the concept of integrated ocean management. Can you speak to this experience and the benefits that you've seen?
Yes, thank you, Craig. And first of all, let me congratulate Jan Gunnar and Vinhan for a great paper and the rest of the authors. I think it's going to be an important contribution to the discussion and action on ocean governance going forward. In our experience, we've done this for almost 2 decades now. It's continuous improvement exercise. We have rolling plans for all our ocean territories that are designed through a very complicated and cumbersome process. It does take a lot of time and resources, but ultimately, because of that, it's also beneficial to all the parties concerned. It's beneficial to nature because it's based on ecosystem knowledge. It's beneficial to business because it does provide a predictable framework. It's beneficial to government because of its integrated nature, its whole of government nature, and for different sectors in the government to have a shared knowledge base is very important. It is important and beneficial to other ocean stakeholders because of the inclusive process, and ultimately to people in terms of equity, in terms of transparency, in terms of accountability. The fact that this is a process that ends up with government white papers to Parliament, with Parliament discussion and parliamentary approval of the documents, means that there is an ultimate accountability resting with the people. And in that sense, underscoring the important point that the ocean is a common domain for that should benefit all people.
Great, great. Thank you, Vidar. Now, one follow-up question here. Like many countries, Norway regulates its sectors through different sectoral acts. Now, one of the advantages of integrated ocean management is that it helps manage competing demands, right, on the marine environment. So could you provide an example or two of how Norway's approach to integrated ocean management has been effective at actually resolving a potential conflict between 2 or more different users of the ocean?
Well, I think first of all, it's obviously not a document that rids us of all sectoral conflicts. Governments, much of the action is in the sectors, much of the actual regulations are in the sectors, but then it makes it all the more important that we have a shared knowledge base and that we have that transparency, that inclusion, and that ultimate accountability. And it does provide a framework for settling difficult trade-offs in a way that is transparent and accountable. One recent example, or actually very topical example, is a discussion we have right now about where to set the limits, where to draw the line for oil and gas exploration in the Norwegian Arctic. It's a very controversial topic at home and partly internationally as well. And that question is being settled this spring in Parliament on the basis of our most recent management plan for the Norwegian Sea.
Great. And I can just sneak in one final question. You kind of started suggest this, the private sector, businesses. What role do businesses and ocean industries play in Norway's integrated ocean management?
Well, obviously a big part, because Norway is an ocean-based economy largely. Most of our exports and a lot of our jobs are derived from the ocean economy, and therefore ocean business is absolutely instrumental. And they play an important role also in the considerations and in the design of these plans. And I would like to say that maybe in the beginning, in the early 2000s, when these plans were in the starting blocks, businesses were not the biggest fans of these plans. Today, business look upon them as very good instruments, particularly because they do provide predictability, and predictability is good for business.
Great, great. Thank you. Thank you, Vidar, and thank you for sharing those experiences. I'm going to turn now to Marie Winyo-Menez. Marie, can you take us to another part of the world here, across the planet, to the Coral Triangle Initiative? It'd be great if you could share with us how the within that initiative, how did the principles of integrated ocean management, how are they used across the region to facilitate a framework that harmonizes national plans of action for achieving a sustainable ocean economy? Marie.
Yeah, so thank you, Craig. So as we all know, the Coral Triangle region is the global epicenter of marine biodiversity. And aside from that, all the populations, and especially the coastal communities there, are highly dependent on various ecosystem goods and services. And thus, this multilateral partnership was formed to address common crucial needs. It's not all the sectors of the ocean economy. It prioritized food security, biodiversity, and climate change, which are the major concerns and common concerns in these areas. And this was supported by formal government commitments to develop a regional plan, and as well as implement a national plan of action. So some of the elements of IOM that are very apparent would be the ecosystem-based approach, which takes into account the interconnectivities and interrelations within ecosystems with respect to also human activities that has been used. The spatial planning was knowledge-based. It made use of all the best available information, including traditional and local existing knowledge, develop plans and guidance for MPA management, fisheries, establishment of networks, guidelines that can be used to harmonize or guide parallel initiatives in the different countries that were involved. And then finally, of course, the stakeholder participation. It has been mentioned earlier, aside from the participation and the alliances built across countries in this region, which is very important for capability building and improving capacities all over, was in the stakeholder participation, particularly of small fishers. In the case of many marine protected areas, local marine protected areas, not only were fishers and local communities involved in planning, they were actually involved in implementation, establishment, enforcement, and monitoring. And so this provides impacts, as we said, not only ecologically, as mentioned, also in terms of economic terms. Aside from increased fishing catch in adjacent areas that have been documented, the better status of reefs that have been protected have brought out new opportunities for development of tourism, bringing about additional economic streams that were not there before. And so we address both ecological, economic, and social empowerment, which is also very important. It's not only the Coral Triangle area, but I guess in a lot of the tropical insular countries and small island nations, it's very important to get the participation at the local level, and at the same time build alliances across countries to be able to move forward, given that resources are more constrained and more challenged by vulnerabilities to climate change.
Great, thank you, Marie. And what could you share with us? One or two of the unique challenges that was faced in approaching this from a regional perspective.
Oh yeah. So well, based on various studies and analysis, aside from the basic constraints of resources and financial resources, particularly, many of the challenges were fundamental governance issues. One, institutionalizing conservation spatial planning, conservational planning within governments and across governments with different governance systems was certainly difficult. Moreover, the integration at different levels from the local to the national was also difficult. And then finally, one of the other aspects that have been a challenge was the failure to overcome the short-term funding needs as well as the political cycles in relation to the longer-term timeframes of planning and implementation. So every time there's a change in political leadership, especially at the local level, things change. So there's no sustainability. So that has been a challenge, the governance issues, and of course the lack of capacity and capabilities. And I would like to mention including scientific capability, not only the natural sciences, but in the social sciences, which is very important considering that the socio-ecological and socio-cultural aspects in developing countries are very important in understanding the dependencies of these communities. So those were the constraints, the differences in capabilities, governance systems.
Great, thank you, Marie. And for all of you, you can learn more about this case example by reading this blue paper. Thank you, Marie, for sharing the successes and the challenges. Let me now cross over the Pacific to the United States. Amy, the United States is a unique case study in this blue paper, looking at how integrated ocean management has been utilized across state and federal waters. Can you explain to us how and why this came about, and what changes you've seen in the management of the U.S. ocean economy as a result? Amy.
Sure. Thanks, Craig. Thanks for the question. So as we discussed in the report, there are a few different legal mechanisms that a region, a country can take to really drive integrated coordination and management. And what I'll talk about a little bit is the U.S. approach at the federal national level. So this was accomplished through a National Ocean Policy Executive Order, and that directed all the relevant ocean and coastal agencies to coordinate, to develop regional ocean plans in areas that wanted to take on this integrated planning approach. And really before we took this initiative and started to think about coordinating, we had a long-standing history. There were over 22 management agencies with some stake in the ocean that were operating in silos. We had various ocean and coastal management agencies collecting ocean data. We didn't know where those data gaps existed. There were lots of potential duplications. We didn't have a lot of coordination around potential synergies and what that looked like. So there's been a lot of work here to undo some of that cultural institutional structures of sort of business as usual and move toward this collective integrated approach. And really to accomplish that, that needs to be both a structural and a cultural change, much like the other panelists have talked about here. The structural change came through the executive order, which I mentioned. It established a White House level National Ocean Council, which had key leaders from all the relevant management agencies. It outlined a composition for regional bodies and demonstrated that political will at the really high level, at the top. And then the cultural change started to happen when this approach was defined and people started to see value. Much like was the Norway case, there was skepticism and people need to see themselves in this planning approach. And so when people start to see that this is going to make their business better, this is going to make science better, this is going to influence societal values and bring that sort of local and regional context into management needs, you start to see real change and the cultural shift starts to happen. As we mentioned earlier on the panel, local and regional tailoring was really valuable and critical for the U.S. And in the U.S. context, a lot of this needed to happen on a voluntary basis and within existing management authorities. No one wanted to be forced to plan holistically, particularly certain regions or certain groups were originally turned off by the process, certain states, industry, fisheries. It needed to be sort of comprehensive and people needed to be brought into the process. And really the biggest challenge here is trying to balance our coastal states' interests and their needs for their waters with authorities at the federal level. And so some lessons learned were, top-down directives just don't work in isolation. You really have to have support from those who use the ocean, those who make their livelihoods off of this, those who, know what's happening on the water every day. Regional variability was really critical. That is a lesson learned that, as we mentioned in the paper, have to be tailor-made. You have to have that local context. Robust stakeholder engagement is a critical component. And of course, data and information about what's happening out in the ocean. And then, Craig, your last question, your last point about what were the benefits to the economy and what have we seen change since we started this. I'll note for folks that the U.S. is not as far along as Norway. We are not 2 decades in. This initiative was started back in 2010, but we are starting to see shifts in management. There's been increased engagement with industry, particularly the maritime industry, who was incredibly skeptical of this process early on, is now one of the biggest allies and supporters of this integrated approach. We've seen collaboration on what's needed for offshore wind to advance. We've started to move from this very hyper-local, state-driven lease process, individual lease sale process to a more regional offshore lease approach. And then lastly, I think one of the best products that have come out of this process so far is publicly accessible regional ocean data portals that have all the ocean ecosystem and human activities all in one place. So for the Northeast and Mid-Atlantic regions, we have ocean data portals with over 5,000 plus data layers on industry, spatial activity, marine mammals, fisheries, culturally significant areas, and habitat. And that is an incredibly useful tool when you're talking about trying to make transparent, open dialogue management decisions.
Great, thank you, Amy. What a fascinating experience that we're observing here in the United States on this. And as you say, taking some cues from some of the other leaders that we've already heard about. A lot of questions are coming in from you. Please keep on sending in your questions. We're going to get to the question and answer session in just a few minutes. I just have a couple more questions here for two remaining panelists. Turning now to Jan Gunnar. Do you mind just speaking briefly about some of the barriers to successfully implementing integrated ocean management, and what can we do to help countries overcome these? Jan Gunnar.
Yeah, unfortunately, there are quite a few barriers. One we mentioned up front is that it's not necessarily enough to have a legal regime in place. The mismatch between the legal framework that the country has and the realities are often quite big. It could be due to illicit activities or lacking enforcement or capacity. And we make the point in the paper that it's vital to have mechanisms in place, not just to develop the IOM plans, but also to implement them. So that's a key element. Another one related to that is the lack of coordination. That might take many forms. In some countries, it's weak legal and institutional arrangements when it comes to the division of responsibility. So the coordination is then suffering from these weak institutional cooperation and also responsibilities. This could also be within or among across several countries where the coordination is lacking. There is one ocean, the biosystem and ecosystem doesn't know any borders, so very often we need this cross-country collaboration, which so successfully has been done in the Coral Reef Triangle. And then how to overcome them? Well, in the paper we point actually to the political will as one very important issue. We find that sometimes the political will is not strong enough. We also point to the importance of knowledge and data. It's really vital to strengthen our knowledge about the oceans by both using the existing knowledge and data and developing new one. And specifically, we point to the United Nations Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainable Development as a strong vehicle for ensuring that in future. Thank you.
Thank you, Jan Gunnar. Minhan, the experience of Xiamen highlights many of the core principles of integrated ocean management and why it can be so effective in supporting governments and local authorities to manage very complex marine environments. The paper talks to the challenges and to the lessons learned from this experience, but can you elaborate on the benefits that such an integrated approach has brought to this area, and has this been adopted elsewhere in China? Minhan, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Craig. First of all, I have to apologize for get disconnected when I was talking. Back to the Xiamen case, I think I have to point out Xiamen learned the lesson in a very hard way from this initial stage of development. You all know that along with China's reform and opening up initiative back in 40 years ago, Xiamen became one of the first 4 special economy zones in 1984. So we enjoyed the booming of economy, but with very little regard to environment and coastal ecosystem. So the consequences was quite clear. Aggressive coastal reclamation, except the seawall constraint coastal marine agriculture. I just give you one dramatic example. In the late 80s and the early 90s, the agriculture cage in the reefs taking up nearly 50% of the West Sea area. So consequently, the habitat, a lot of pollution problem. So that was the one of the consequence of conventional fragmented approach of administration governance and the lack of the scientific knowledge are 2 most important parts leading to such a consequence of the environment ecosystem. So that came up with the political will and the realistic need to adopt integrated ocean management. So Xiamen was the first city adopted the integrated ocean management, at that time into coastal management. And again, there's the effectiveness is reflected by the very strong partnership between the government and academia, framed by the Marine Management Coordination Committee led by the mayor, and supported by a marine expert group. And that was the foundation for effective instead of the silo management. And in practical, this partnership offered the integrated mechanism within the government system and the scientifically coordinate sector interest. So I think the third major lesson or experience, I have to also highlight international collaboration was one of the experience we gained, because at the earliest stage of the integrated ocean management practice adopted by Xiamen was in collaboration with IMO, UNDP, and the GF. And the Xiamen was selected at that time as a demonstration site for integrated coast management. And later on was the PAMC. So the partnership in this with international collaboration, share the knowledge, framework, and with the local tailoring and the system, that was the effectiveness, the way to make that happen.
Great, thank you, Minhan. I'm going to wrap up this session for the panelists. I'd like to give virtual applause to the authors. Congratulations on launching this paper, and a virtual applause and thank you to everyone on this panel for sharing their perspectives. Now, but you're not off the hook quite yet. We have a stream of questions for you, so I'm going to lead off on those. And the audience has been very good at basically directing the questions to individuals. So I'm going to say who it is first. That gives you 3 seconds to prepare, which is better than 0 seconds to prepare. And let's just dive right into this. There's too many questions for our session today, so apologies to those of you who we don't get to, but we'll try to go as quickly as we can. And therefore, panelists, please be brief and precise in your response, okay? First one is for you, Amy. Get ready. What is the difference between integrated ocean management and marine spatial planning? The floor is yours.
What we've seen sort of in the U.S. context is integrated ocean management being that, you know, you're having all the different federal agencies, who are in charge of different management schemes, be it fisheries, be it transportation, be it shipping. Those are all coordinating to address management goals. In terms of marine spatial planning, that term has been thought of often as you're actually drawing lines on a map and saying these areas should be going here spatially. So they're similar but somewhat different. But really the whole point of what we're trying to discuss here is, how do you have an integrated approach? How do you coordinate all the ocean uses in a way that we can start to make really effective decisions? And that, you know, requires having agencies at the table who actually manage those resources, but also having the local context and the stakeholders and the people who use the ocean, and defining what those societal values are. And then you can start to sort of get into a more defined approach of where certain uses should go and where that application can be best served in the ocean.
Great, thank you, Amy. Vidar, the next question is for you. You mentioned how labor-intensive developing, reviewing, and implementing integrated ocean management has been within the Norway context. This, of course, translates to the need for financing the process of integrated ocean management. So how is this done in Norway? Vidar.
Well, the process is financed over public budgets. It's coordinated by one ministry, and that's the Ministry of Climate and Environment. That is not because it's an environmental plan, but it's because that's the ministry that doesn't have sectoral interests in terms of industries. So they're coordinating, and funding comes out of their budget. And then, of course, research agencies, etc., chip in with their parts.
Great, thank you. Thank you. This question is for Marie. For governments of developing countries, in particular those that may lack the capacity to manage their marine resources individually, much less in an integrated way, what would you suggest as the first step, right? What's your recommendation for how do you get started, right, to achieving the benefits of and the goal of integrated ocean management?
Well, what we've seen in developing country practices, even in the seeds, is that you have to strengthen the existing community-based efforts, start with the local efforts because those are usually actionable, and then build on it. And it can be engaging communities in zoning or more integrated approaches within a smaller scale area. In the Philippines, for example, we have municipalities, right? So it can be integrated in a smaller scale involving local stakeholders, and then it can be replicated. Same thing with the marine protected areas. You can start with small ones, but subsequently over time, as we have seen in different parts of the regions, now we have networks of marine protected areas of different scales. So I think it's starting with what is traditionally the most important concern of the developing countries. And usually that relates to poverty and livelihood, food security. So you zero in on that. And that's also the reason why in the Coral Triangle Initiative, food security was a major thrust. And you build on the needs and engage them because it's directly affecting the small communities. So that's where you start. And then you build from there and capacitate and strengthen local and community-based efforts.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Marie. This question is for Minhan. In the Xiamen case study, you stated that integrated ocean management, the team itself, was composed of the mayor and other high-level individuals. Yet what seems to be equally clear is that communities played a crucial role and these stakeholders also must be included. So how does one ensure that their knowledge is valued equally, that they have a genuine say when they're not part of the main institution in charge? Minhan.
Thank you, Craig. That's a very good question. I have to point out that public engagement and the community-based awareness and the participation is one of the actual key elements embedded in the practice of the IOM in Xiamen case. When we adopted the integrated approach involving the conflict sea users, so we realized the community do play a crucial role in decision-making process. So there was a hotline to the mayor, for example, and the community built up the channel to channel chopping of the opinion, and also these environmental assessment projects, stuff like that. In addition to the coordinated sector-based management, there are various ways to community involved, and this is one of the ways that their voice to be heard. And I think it's but it's a continuous effort. Actually, it's still a long way to go to boost every citizen, every community, every stakeholder to be proactive in getting involved in the decision-making process. That's, I would say, in the Xiamen case.
Great, thank you, Minhan. The next question is for Jan Gunnar. How is the issue of marine litter managed in integrated ocean management with all these different activities that come with the ocean? So how does marine litter fit into all this?
Yeah, thank you. It's a very good question, and I'm not sure if the answer will be as good as the question, because it's early days for the plastic and marine pollution in the sense of management. And if you take the global view on that, it's still not very well integrated into management systems and management models. Of course, in the paper, we address marine pollution and also biodiversity and especially climate change as three, let's say, forcings on the environment that all needs to be accounted for. But I'm afraid today, as far as I know, marine litter is very weakly integrated into management systems. But this is a good question because it also put a light on how this new environmental challenge that we have faced in recent years is actually also something that needs to be taken into account.
Great, thank you, Jan Gunnar, and thank you for being honest on where things stand right now. Vidar, a question for you has come our way. Even though we've mapped very little of our ocean, greater or less than 95% is unmapped, we still know a lot about the ocean, about the loss of nature, loss of biodiversity, you name it, as well as the effects of climate change. So how can we get the world's decision makers to include the science we already have more into different global, regional, and national political decisions going forward if we're going to achieve holistic, integrated ocean management? And so, how can we make the world act on the knowledge that we already have? Vidar, that very simple question.
Well, I think, first of all, we need to make decision makers aware of the enormous opportunities of the ocean. Yes, it does have enormous problems, but the ocean is also providing us a lot of opportunities for jobs and economic prosperity. And particularly in a post-COVID world with recovery on everybody's minds, there's a case to be made that we can do more with the ocean and more from the ocean in a sustainable way. And that again speaks to the need not only to integrate ocean uses, but also to integrate ocean and land. That speaks to the plastic issue. It speaks to the fact that food production from the ocean is way more climate friendly, protein production from the ocean, way more climate friendly than protein production from land. And if we can make decision makers see the benefit, including for their re-election in the economic opportunity of the ocean, coupled with the environmental stewardship that is needed, I think that's the angle to really raise the level of awareness.
Great, thank you, Vidar. Marie, back to you. In developing countries, we often face rapid changes in political conditions. Do you have any experience in how to solve this situation when it comes to developing integrated ocean management plans? Marie.
I'm sorry, rapid change. Can you repeat that? Rapid change.
Political conditions. The political conditions change a lot, right? But integrated ocean management is integrated. The process takes time. How does one factor, how does one deal with the fact of political change yet still do integrated ocean management?
Well, like I mentioned earlier, that's in fact one of the major challenges, the fundamental, political cycles. And well, I think that overall, where there's a heightened awareness of good governance, used to be, for example, in the Philippines, it was so hard to have marine protected areas. But over time, we saw the fact that if you're the local government who did not have a marine protected area or coastal resource management plan, you're the odd man out. So you develop a new culture that grows. And I think with sustainable development goals is the same. We have leaders who are more aware, which I think is very important, of scales and global connectivities, even within the ocean values. I think we will be able to have more sustained, longer term integrated marine management efforts. But it's really, it's transformational, so it takes a lot of effort. And I would think that efforts like this at the global scale, regional scale, national scale, and even a local scale, so it becomes a culture, a change in the culture. And so maybe changes in governance will follow. And so we just have to keep at it, and consistency. And I think the collaboration at different scales will make a change that would make that more suitable. So even if there's a turnover, it becomes a necessary, essential thing to sustain.
Thank you, Marie. Next one's for Amy. Back to you. In the experience in the United States, what's the role of NGOs and other local or community organizations?
Yeah, so, sometimes government, for whatever reason, isn't always the greatest at stakeholder engagement. It's either we don't have the resources to do that or the time to build those relationships. So NGOs often can play that role where they know a lot of people who work on various management issues. They can play that connector role, and that's the role that Ocean Conservancy served in the integrated ocean management process here. We worked both at the national level, but at the regional level, serving as a facilitator of sorts, identifying who should be part of the process, identifying what industry should be at the table with conservation groups, with scientists, with universities, highlighting when, a lot of these people have day jobs as well. A lot of industry partners, for instance, have a day job that they also need to be paying attention to this integrated ocean management approach. So we work to, build support and trust and identify when key meetings were, or when data that was relevant to their industry, where they should weigh in and provided value there. So we can serve as that sort of facilitator, honest broker, coming at it and supporting the process. And, with no sort of set agenda other than we need to advance this collectively and do what's best for, not only the economy, which we've talked a lot about today, but also the ocean health and the environment.
Great, thank you, Amy. This question is now for all of you, all of the panelists. The principles and elements of integrated ocean management have been well established internationally, and the benefits have been demonstrated through case studies, thanks in part to the blue paper that's been launched today. So what can the world do, or what can certain entities do to actually elevate and advance integrated ocean management? So I'd love to hear your one thought of what can be done now to actually advance this approach. Vidar, I'll start with you.
Well, I think that's actually the most important question, because the concept has been around since the Rio conference in 1992. It's in the SDGs. It's been referred to in a number of reports. The high-level panel is taking it forward and further. And the next step needs to be to get a coalition of actors to support countries, from science to public management, in making this happen. And I think the high-level panel would like to work with interested parties in making that happen.
Thank you. Marie?
Well, I think, not to repeat what has been said, but I really think that enhanced partnerships, even among countries in the region, moving towards the same goal and at different levels, has to be achieved. So it's consistent effort at different levels, from the global to the national, to integrate and to improve, or to meet the challenges of the Sustainable Development Goals, particularly in developing a sustainable oceans and resilient communities.
Thank you. Amy?
Yeah, to build on that a bit, I'd say, beyond the directly connecting different governments and identifying lessons learned and, learning from the case studies that we have out there, the people that are attending and are part of this, if you live in an area where this type of approach is happening, obviously, these processes are based on societal values. It's about defining what, a region or a country wants to see as part of their ocean, and what they want to see in the future. So being engaged in that process, and also recognizing that, these things take time and also resources. A lot of what we try to do is educate Congress here in the US on what the value is of this, and identifying where, research and science and funding needs to actually support these efforts.
Minhan?
Yeah, I agree. This is the most important questions. But I want to highlight this, the keyword as opportunity. A blue paper laid out 6 opportunities for actions. And if you look back, the initiative by 14 world leaders committed to the high-level panel for sustainable ocean development, this is one of the perfect reflection that world leaders is committed to enhance the integrated ocean management practice. And secondly, the power of these case studies we demonstrate in this blue paper. Actually, there's opportunity again, and there is a flexibility to do in different locations. If you have enough scientific knowledge, and with the partnership with the local government, with the framework of these legislative and etc. So again, back to the word opportunity for action, and the success for the future is the key to integrate ocean management. Of course, the science of the integrated ocean management itself is evolving, and the progress with the research and all this leadership get involved. Thank you.
Thank you, Minhan. And Jan Gunnar, your thoughts?
Thank you. Well, I think real life examples that can quantify the value of, rather than having a short-term profit kind of angle to things, that you have a long-term sustainable approach, will make people
just see it and also act on it. There are good examples of this in fishery management, for example, where you have a quota system that is limiting the catch in such a way that it can support a long-term beneficial harvesting from that resource. And in my neighborhood in the Barents Sea up north in the Atlantic, there are understood by everyone that the way this fishery stock has been managed over the years is to the best of the people that fish from it, and it's also to the best of the environment. So I think we need to come up with real examples that are quantifying the value of a certain sustainable approach and a good management.
Thank you very much, Jan Gunnar. And thank you all panelists. I thought this was a great session, very great, very insightful responses to very good questions. So thank you all participants for sending us your questions. Hopefully we got through as many, got through most of them, and hopefully you got your question answered. Very great insights here on this work. So again, virtual applause to this panel on a very exciting report. And speaking of the report, here's where you can actually go to find it. Launch today. Please download it. Here's the website address. Tweet about it. If you have any further questions, please contact us on the info@oceanpanel.org. Likewise, if you would like to join future launches of Blue Papers, please email us at that contact as well. We have more to come. And speaking of more Blue Papers and more events, next week we're hosting an event on plastics as a key to addressing ocean pollution. So just a week from today, you can see the featured speakers there. Plastics, a hot issue. And so please join us for this session. We've lined up a nice cohort of panelists, just like we had today on this issue. So again, I hope you all learned more than you knew an hour and a half ago. Please read the Blue Paper, fascinating issue. As we heard Vidar say, how do we raise the profile and get more nations actually implementing integrated ocean management is the question, the most important question. And it's something hopefully each one of you that participated in this webinar can actually play a role in making a reality. I trust that this is an issue of passion to you. I know that everyone I talk to has questions on their mind around what can we be doing to actually better manage the oceans. We all recognize the ocean is a life source for our planet, and it generates oxygen, food, jobs, pharmaceuticals. In fact, the test used to diagnose COVID-19 was developed from an enzyme from deep water microbes, right? But as we all know, the ocean is in crisis. It faces unprecedented pressure from climate change, overfishing, pollution, and habitat loss. And as today's Blue Paper articulates, integrated ocean management is a critical, I would say fundamental component for turning the tide on the ocean. It's smart policy, it's smart for business, it's smart for people, and it's smart for the planet. So I'd like to thank our distinguished guests today for sharing their insights and their perspectives. Congratulations to the authors. And I want to thank you, our audience, for being so engaged on this issue. And let us not forget that the ocean is neither too big to fail nor too big to fix, and it's not too late to act. Thank you.